Welcome to the Best of Come Follow Me. It is impossible for any one person to listen to all the podcasts, so we listen to as many as we can each week. And this time we listen to 30 separate podcasts, and we will highlight our favorites. This week we are covering Alma chapters 53 to 63, and that covers the stripling warriors, Moroni's letters to Ammon and to the Nephite leaders, and Moroni retaking all the cities that had been captured by the Lamanites in our last lesson.
This week I really liked the Talking Scripture podcast. I'm picking a highlight from the beginning of the podcast when they're talking about the stripling warriors. So here's the clip.
It makes a huge difference. It's got to be their idea. It has to be, because otherwise in the heat of the battle, they're not going to have the determination that they need. And so I would ask all of us, when is it going to be your idea? One of my favorite words in the Book of Mormon, and I've said this in previous podcasts, is where Nephi says, I glory in my Jesus.
I really love this discussion on agency with the stripling warriors. The idea that it's so important for us to think for ourselves in our own lives. Because these stripling warriors, they chose to serve. They didn't have to, they chose to. It made me think back years ago when I was about 20 years old. I absolutely did not want to serve a mission. But I remember there was a general conference Sunday, and it was in the morning session when I received a very clear impression that I needed to serve a mission immediately. And so I jumped in. I followed that prompting. But because it was so important to me that this be just my decision, I didn't tell anybody. So I told my brother and I told my cousin and nobody else. And so I had all my mission papers filled out. I told the people who needed to know, like my bishop, stake president, my dentist. But it needed to be my decision. The reality is that mission changed my life. And I am a different person because of my missionary service and the things that I learned. And it wouldn't have been the same had I been forced to serve or bribed to serve.
Great point.
Yeah.
This week, I was really struck with the idea of keeping covenants as told in Alma 53. I want to highlight the section from Scripture Gems, but they talk about when is it okay to break an oath that you make to God for a good reason. They point out that their covenant to never fight or to take up weapons again was not a commandment. God didn't say, hey, you're not allowed to fight anymore. It was something that they chose to do as a covenant with him. And now here is the clip.
What's fascinating is what we're going to see is that the fathers keeping their covenants is going to do more to bless the Nephites than if they took up weapons and came to fight. I think Mormon is kind of describing that as he goes on, but watch for that. Even though it seems like, well, I could do this or I could do this, keep your covenants. That will do more than anything.
I love what they said about this. Like, we cannot lower our standards or negate our covenants to help somebody else. The power that we get comes through the covenants, and that we will do better serving others when we keep those. It's just something really good to think about how much strength comes from the covenant and how we need to honor them no matter what. If you're in a situation where it seems compassionate or right, where is that going to take you afterwards? Is it going to bring you closer to God, or is it going to take you further from him? Is it going to help you keep your covenants, or is it going to take you away from your covenants?
The podcast I chose for this week is Scripture Central's podcast with Tyler Griffin. This was a great podcast this week. He invited on as his special guest the current president of BYU Idaho, talking about how he's preparing the youth of the church for future leadership and stuff. It was really appropriate for a lesson on the stripling warrior.
He was great.
In their conversation about teaching the youth, and he told this really cute story.
He records every single game. And then he doesn't watch it live. He records it. Once the game's over, he checks the score. And if the Dodgers win, he watches the game. And if they lose, he deletes it. And then so he says to me, so if the Dodgers give up a 3-run home run in the 4th inning, I don't fret because I know who wins in the end. The Dodgers win every game that I watch.
Love that.
Yeah, that was so cute. That also, it gave me a lot to think about. Like, we do know who's going to win in the end. We know how this ends up. And we have read the story of the stripling warriors. I think that's what their faith was. It was this confidence that they were going to win in the end. The Dodgers win every game I watch, and the Lord always, always wins. And that righteous people who are under covenant with the Lord will receive the blessings the Lord has promised them. Our evidence this week comes from the Book of Mormon, a masterclass by John Hilton. He talks about a student of his who did sort of a word analysis of covenant-related words, promise, oath, covenant-related words in the Book of Mormon, and created this chart. And you can see how these words are used throughout the Book of Mormon, but certain authors in certain areas use them much more. This would be a very, very difficult thing to pull off if you were just writing a book. So in that sense, it serves as evidence. But it also serves as an indication to us of what the war chapters are about and why they've been included in the Book of Mormon.
A number of points were made in podcasts for which we would like to offer a different perspective.
This week, it was virtually impossible to find a podcast that did not criticize Captain Moroni for the letters that we have included in these chapters. Answering all of the criticisms that were made of Captain Moroni will take too long for this podcast. We're going to keep this short, but we're going to create a separate video that you can listen to if you're interested in hearing more. The letter that he wrote that we talk about as though it's a letter to Pahoran wasn't. It was a letter to all the governors of the land.
Second thing quickly about Moroni that we'll expand on in our separate video is it's important not to forget who Moroni is, a man of perfect understanding, did not delight in bloodshed, firm in the faith of Christ, and the devil would never have power over the hearts of the children of men if all men were like him. One podcast claimed that Moroni was trying to goad Amron into attacking him because
In his letter to him.
Because Moroni can only defend, he can't attack. This comment confuses offensive war with offensive tactics in a defensive war. The Nephites were, in fact, only supposed to defend themselves. That doesn't mean they couldn't take offensive measures as part of that defense. In these chapters, we see these cities, Nephite cities that have been taken over by Lamanites, and now Moroni is recapturing them, and that's not prohibited.
And our third point, the Ammonites are still not pacifists.
We can link.
Yep, we'll link to that.
Joke of the week comes from Scripture Central. This is President Meredith talking. The context is discussing the optimistic outlook of the gospel.
Really encouraged us as leaders to make sure that we convey the joy of the gospel. And sometimes that's hard. I remember as a young bishop coming off the stand after a sacrament meeting, and my wife met me at the foot of the stairs with a stern look and a question. She said, "Are you happy?" And I said, "Well, yes, I'm happy." And she said, "Well, when you're seated on the stand in front of the saints, remind your face." And that's a great reminder.
Thank you for joining us. We hope this helps you in your personal study of the scriptures this week. There are many, many other good podcasts, and so you can check those out in our links below. Please remember to follow Jesus Christ. He loves you.